Welcome back to Beyond the Lesson Plan. Today we have a great episode for you. We are joined by Sarah Beth and Sarah Lee, and they're going to share their unique experience of being homeschooled during a time when it wasn't widely accepted, and it was even illegal here in Michigan. In the first part, we're going to dive into their childhood, what it looked like, and the challenges their family faced.
So I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. Does that sound like fun?
My name's Sarah Beth Bonjour. I was homeschooled. My family started homeschooling in, I think it was like 1989. So it was like the tail end right before the legislation was in the middle of changing. And my husband was also homeschooled, and I am homeschooling my own kids.
Yeah, that's awesome. My name is Sarah Lee. My mom and dad were homeschooling us in like the late 80s, probably around that same time. Probably a little bit before 89. All of that legislation was changing, but it was still very much a taboo thing to do. And it was a very interesting time in our lives, and it's very different now.
So just for those that don't know, homeschooling was not legal in Michigan until 1993. So if you're starting in 89, you were 4 years underground. So tell us about your family with your siblings. How many were there of you, Sarah Beth?
So there's 4 siblings. I have an older brother and sister, which actually, just an interesting note, is my family's blended because we're Brady Bunch. My dad died and my mom remarried. Dad left his wife. So we had my 2 older siblings so they would have been going into 7th grade when we started. They were in 6th grade the last year. And then my younger brother and I, so we would have been 2nd, 3rd grade and 1st grade at the time that we started homeschooling. So.
Okay, and how about you, Sarah Lee?
I am one of 9. I'm the 4th in line. 3 older brothers, me, 2 younger sisters, 3 younger brothers, and we were all homeschooled from the beginning. So I think that it was a huge deal for my mom and dad at the time, but it's not something they really talked to us a lot about the specifics of it until we were a lot younger or a lot older. Because I think at the time it was more just like, here's what we're doing, and it seemed normal to us, so we didn't really talk much about the fact that it was actually rather legal and taboo and a problem until we were a little bit older.
Did you call yourself anything at the time? Because now they would say you're the pioneers or you were the activists, or at the time, were you just homeschooling?
Yeah, I don't remember, for us being any, the pioneers were just a couple years before. We started, there was a lot of people when it became legal in the 90s that started. But there were some, because I remember, the first year I believe we were homeschooling, we got together with some homeschoolers to take, the Iowa, but my mom really wasn't, she's not a idle chit-chat person. so I think there was some, I remember we went roller skating, but there wasn't as much as there is now. So, there was stuff, but.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely didn't call ourselves anything.
No.
I think now, in the past, probably, actually, since I started homeschooling our kids, I met, some of the people who work for INCH, the mission organization, and they would call themselves the pioneers, right?
I think they were early 80s.
Yes, early 80s, yeah. And so, we were just homeschoolers.
Did your families do any activist work to try to get homeschooling legalized in the state, either of you guys?
My family didn't. I remember my mom talking about the things because, she had a bachelor's degree, and at one point, we were good if we had a bachelor's degree. So I remember her talking about the legislation, but we weren't actively involved in it.
Okay.
Yeah, same thing for us.
Okay.
My mom had my oldest brother and then 4-year gap, and then every 18 months, 20 months to 2 years, kids. So she really didn't have time to be going to Lansing and actively helping. She was just trying to survive.
She was actively doing other things.
Yeah.
Our family was homeschool legal defense. That was one of those things. If you were going to homeschool, you were part of homeschool legal defense. And I remember them talking, because I was younger, but them talking about, what was going on with different things. But
okay. So you said Sarah Beth, you started homeschooling in second or third?
So I was held back in first grade. So age wise, I would have been going into third, but I was second grade,
Okay.
curriculum type of thing.
So you must have gone to public or private?
I went to public school for kindergarten.
Okay.
Like half a year to one school and half a year to another one. And I was talking to my mom, but in kindergarten, I had a teacher that told my mom she didn't like me.
Oh, goodness.
So that was one of the things that, and then we switched to a Christian school, which it was, the curriculum was different, hard. But yeah, so I was like, I laughed and I'm like, well, I did public school, I did Christian school, I was homeschooled, and then I actually went to school to get a teaching degree. So I worked in the public schools for a while, and now I'm homeschooling my own kids. So.
So do you remember, is that why your mom pulled you out, was because of the teacher that said they didn't like you? That's terrible.
Well, that was one of the things. So it was funny when she talked to me, but we really did, because my older brother, he in the public school, the classroom, my mom said she walked into it and it was like a madhouse, different things like that. And then they went to the Christian school, but he was really struggling academically. So she was like, well, I was spending all night doing homework with him, and I might as well spend my time during the day, because that's how he was getting his education. So, well, the rest of us went, it was probably mostly because of my older brother and the help that he needed.
Okay. So why did your family, Sarah Lee, decide to homeschool? What was the reasoning or the why in your family?
Yeah, my mom dealt with a lot of bullying in school, even though she went to a very small country school that wasn't that big. She still dealt with bullying, and she learned how to work through it, and she ended up doing really well at the end of it. But I think for her, that was just something she didn't want for us kids. And it was bullying specifically because she would carry her Bible on the bus to school to read it, and people would just make a ton of fun of her for doing that. And then my dad grew up in inner city Toledo.
Okay.
And he was a very, both my parents were very strong Christians, but he was a very bold in his faith,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't really care what people thought about him. He didn't care really if people said bad things about him, but he definitely still saw a lot of that struggle. And so I think for both of them, it was, we want our kids to grow up learning the values that we want them to learn, not the values of what someone else is going to teach them. And we just don't see the public school system getting any better, which they were right.
Mm-hmm.
It's not gotten better, it's gotten worse. And so they were just, they told us we were willing to go to bat for that, as long as we possibly could, to make sure that you guys were raised with the values that we wanted you to see.
Now, what decade would your parents have been graduating or being bullied in schools? Because, you always hear, oh, well, public school was so great in this era because there was Bible in the public school and blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
But was it really? Bullying is always going to happen.
Yes.
But, were they in the 60s? Were they in the 70s?
They probably would have been the 70s.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they had already taken Bible out of the public school at that point.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. My mom's not here to quote me on it. But either way, it was definitely something that which is weird for my mom, because the small country town that she grew up in, everyone went to church, but she still had this stigma with her. And I think it was because she loved Jesus, and she kind of wore that on her sleeve. And for other people, it was well, that's just something we do on Sundays. And so they would make fun of her for it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So, Sarah Beth, back to you. How did they withdraw you back then?
Yeah, and I don't know necessarily that, because we were at the Christian school at the time, so they probably just let them know that we weren't coming back. So it wasn't obviously we'd been withdrawn from the public school to go to the Christian school. So, yeah, I'm not exactly sure. My mom, I should have asked my mom.
That's quite possible that she had already withdrawn you from the public school.
Yeah.
The private school doesn't really have to report to the state, so then there was really no issue with it. But so did you have to stay inside? Did you have to, did you grow up in
Fear?
But even rural, did you grow up rurally or in the city? And so was there a different dynamic if you were out in the country versus if you were in the city? But did you have to stay inside and not answer your phone and all of that stuff?
hide under the bed when someone knocks on the door and don't come out. We've heard of those,
Yeah.
you know,
You hear
people.
those extreme-
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were in the country, so I remember like we did not answer the phone during the day. I do remember that. And then at least the first couple of years, I remember thinking about like being careful going out because you didn't want to get like the truancy officer, which
Okay.
I'm like, I don't even think like with my kids they know what a truancy officer is. You know? But yeah, so I mean like I remember saying home like, but I don't think we weren't. I don't remember being outside like during the day a ton. I mean, we'd run around the house when Mom's was like, "You need to get your energy out." So we weren't like locking the doors. But yeah, I think it was like one of those things you didn't. But we were in the country, so
Okay.
Yeah, we were in, so until I was like 8 or 9, something around in there, we were in like just the outskirts of a town, but enough, like close enough to the town that there were a ton of people driving by. And yes, we were not allowed to go outside. I remember that. I remember distinctly like looking out the window waiting for the school bus to show up, because then once all the kids dispersed on the school bus, then it was fine for us to disperse outside. And I don't remember it being like this super traumatic thing though. Like it was just a fact of life, and we always had tons of fun playing inside, and I had a lot of siblings, so it was just always like, oh yeah, that's a thing. It's interesting though, I never remember the phone thing. Like we would pick up the phone.
Yeah.
But there definitely was, like, my parents did get turned in at one point, and we did have CPS show up at our door, and they weren't about the homeschooling part of it. They were more wanting to just make sure there was food and, like, places for us to sleep and whatever. And so I remember leading up to that, like, my parents were very nervous, but we're also like not putting that fear into us, which I was really thankful for. So that's just like a blip in my memory. Like I remember them showing up and looking at the house and looking at the fridge and the pantry, and then they left and everything was fine.
So when, just to pivot back to the school buses, when the school buses came down the road and all the kids got back home, and you went to go, did you play with the kids from school? And were they asking you, like, why aren't you at school with us?
Yeah, so there were 2 neighbors across the road from us. One of them was a boy who was more my brother's age, and then the other one was a bunch of girls that were more like me and my sister's ages, and we did play with them. And I never remember getting questions about it.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, the boy that was my brother's age for one of my birthdays put a little stuffed animal in the mailbox. Like, we just hung out. We had a good time. We did fun things together. The girls across the street invited us to their birthday party. But I will say, like, the girls across the street, their families were Christians. Like, their parents were Christians. And so that, I think, probably contributed to it. And I don't think we really ever interacted with the other boy's family, like his parents at all. Like, it was just kind of him, like, he just kind of did his own thing.
Okay.
Which is kind of sad to look back on. But, yeah, they were both really nice, and we never really talked about it. My parents might have. I'm assuming my parents probably did at some point, but I never knew about it.
And did your parents know who turned them in?
Yes.
Was it family?
No, it was family of friends.
Yeah.
So it was like a friend that wasn't homeschooling. I don't think necessarily thought we were doing a bad job or anything, but the parents found out and like thought, and they didn't even know anything about us really, and they were just upset about it. So, yeah, what do you do?
Yeah.
That is when, because at that point my parents didn't have HS, and that is when they were like, okay, we need to find something. And they did talk to an attorney before they showed up, and the attorney was just like, here's everything that you need to do. Make sure you have food in your cabinets, which I'm assuming you do. My mom's like, oh yes, we've got, I don't know, at that point it's probably like 5 or 6 kids. We have food. And then they were like, here's what you need to do, and then that's when they became a part of it, because they're like, we really need something to back us up. So
It's crazy to think like something that was illegal, and probably the numbers, I don't even know the numbers of how many homeschoolers there were, and the lack of
They
internet.
were all underground.
The lack of like internet, how do you even know that the HSLDA exists?
Right. That's what I was just looking up to see when it started. So apparently it started in 1983.
How do you find that?
10 years before it was legal in
Michigan.
So how did you find out about it from, especially if you're the only pioneering family
Yeah.
how do you know it's out there? There was no internet.
Right.
I think with my family, and I know I've mentioned this, but HIA was like has problems.
Yes.
But it was homeschooling, and I think that's where like my parents were in that program in. But I think that's like how we knew with it, because they were following legislation not just in Michigan but across the nation with that. So I think that's how. So I was like, well, how did they know? But I think that was how they knew with that. So.
Okay, so I just looked this up too, just to find out how many there were in the 80s. So they say from the beginning of the decade of the 80s, there was about 10 to 15,000 homeschoolers. By the end of the decade, there was about 200,000.
So that's across the United States.
Mm-hmm.
That is like,
Oh my
that's crazy.
word.
Yeah.
That's insane.
That's incredible growth. That's almost like COVID growth. From in the,
Oh yeah.
I don't think that we probably maintained the COVID growth. Do you think we probably lost that?
Maybe.
Not
Probably.
but,
Yeah.
So that was my next question, because you mentioned it, but what curriculum was available?
There was not a lot. So HIA curriculum, we used it for a while.
Hold on, you got to tell everybody what ATI stands for.
Yes, it was Advanced Training Institute, and at the time it was of America. But it was, for lack of a better term, it turned, it wasn't all bad, but it turned very cultish with different things. But they had wisdom books, but they would like hit and miss with curriculum, and it wasn't a good curriculum. So
wisdom books, was it just book of rules? Was it morals? Or did it have math? Like, does wisdom include math?
yes, it wasn't like, if you're talking like scope and sequence, it had no scope and sequence. So
Okay.
like they would, they went through, and like I said, it was a fun idea. They went through the Sermon on the Mount. So like I remember learning about the eyes and learning really deep, and that being good, but it would be like math was like, okay, count to 10, like it wasn't a complete curriculum.
Okay.
So with my family, we ended up reading through them later on, but we ended up using Bob Jones, which when the curriculum, it was the only thing available that would actually sell to homeschoolers, because I don't think you could even get like a Becca, or like, that was one thing when I homeschooled, I'm like, wow, there's so much available. Because like the internet wasn't around.
Right.
But yeah, so like we used Bob Jones, but that was like the only curriculum we had. And then my mom, like I remember, which would have been later when we got to high school, like she was pulling from everything else. Like she did grafting with us that she did on her own. So yeah, there wasn't a lot of curriculum available.
So she had to basically, I mean, did she pull books from the public school that maybe they were getting rid of? Like, where did she come up with her lesson plans at that point? If she's creating the curriculum, that seems overwhelming to be able to say, okay, you've done Algebra 1 with what I've made for you,
Yeah.
like.
Well, so like with math, we use the Bob Jones curriculum as a
Okay.
basis. But my mom was really good. She had a teacher, and it's funny because I ran into somebody else that had this in high school that was really, really good with like English grammar and different things like that. And so enough that she said that her teacher would like not give A's to high school students because she didn't think they could earn them. So she had a really good education with that. So she took that and like taught us writing to her. By the time I got to college, I got an A on every single paper I turned in because it was that good. So she created that curriculum completely herself. And then literature, she loved literature, but I remember like the literature books we were using a lot of times were from her high school, stuff that she had kept from high school.
Okay.
So in that case, she would have, and then just poetry books and different things like that, that she was, interested in. And that was a fun thing because I think it was the second year we were homeschooling, like we took the Iowa test, and they hired a guy from our church at the time that was a public school teacher. And he ended up homeschooling his own kids because like he was grabbing stuff off the shelf, and we were talking about the different literature things, because like my mom read us Macbeth for the first time like when I was 10 years old. So it was one of the things like homeschooling at the time. Later on, you either did it or you didn't, and the people that did it were just blowing away the scores of everybody.
Yeah.
So.
What is the Iowa test?
So the Iowa was standardized testing that I know the Christian schools used.
Okay.
And then like the one time that we got together with a bunch of homeschoolers, they administer that test, because to a certain extent that way if somebody knocked on your door, because that was a real possibility.
Okay.
Because this was still the way of like homeschoolers are weird.
Yes.
And definitely like, as you got in there, like, what about socialization, which I hear less now. But yeah, it was weird. You were weird if you homeschooled. So that was like one of those things. If you had somebody show up at your door, you'd be like, well, here's our test scores. So that I don't know if that was recommended.
Was that enough to send them away?
Well, we never had anybody knock on our door, but
yeah.
I think it probably, and that's the thing, and that's still the same way it is today. It depends on the person who's coming to your door. Because it can be easy to be like, well, yeah, CPS has all of these rules, but like if you get someone who is not friendly to it at all and thinks it's a horrible thing, like they're going to find any way possible to take your kids away. Whereas if you find someone who's like, okay, no, like you're taking care of your kids are healthy, they're not complete weirdos and off the wall and don't know anything, like it probably gave your mom peace of mind, right?
Yes.
Because it probably would have given my mom, she never did that, but it probably would have given her peace of mind. But it's just really dependent on who shows up at your door.
Yeah.
So, especially when it's still illegal.
Right.
And I don't think we did it. I remember taking it twice, so I don't think we kept doing it, but it was probably like, I don't know what the results were, but apparently the results were enough that my mom wasn't worried about it after that point.
So Sarah Lee, what curriculum did your family use?
Yeah, we didn't use Bob Jones, which is funny because I know that it was like very much close to the only thing. We used Saxon for math, which is funny. Like I hear a lot of people now when I talk to the younger generation, they don't know what that is. But if I talk to kids my age, like, oh yeah, we remember Saxon. It was good for like the lower grades, but as we got into like the high school, my poor older brothers had to take it all the way through to like algebra 2 and everything, and they hated it. But we used that up until I was like 9th grade, and then my mom found teaching textbooks.
Okay.
And got that for like just 2 of us to try it out, and I went from hating math and Saxon to like absolutely loving it, and I got done with it so fast. And I think it was like, for me, it was helpful to switch to someone who was giving me a lecture and explaining what it was before I did the lesson versus just reading it.
Yeah.
So was teaching textbooks DVD at the time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because I was going to say, I know it's all online now, but when did that transition happen?
At the time, it was just, you got a DVD with the lecture, and then you had a book with all of the problems in it, and you did the problems, and then you would listen to the lecture, you do the problems in a book on a piece of paper, and that was it. And then my mom had to check it, whereas now it just automatically checks everything. My mom had to go through and check it. So we did that, and then for the really little grades, she did Rod and Staff. She really liked Rod and Staff.
And that's a Mennonite program.
Yeah.
So that was coming out of the one-room schoolhouse.
Correct. Exactly.
And I think that it's still a fairly popular program.
Yeah, it is. So yeah, we did we probably did Rod and Staff until like 2nd or 3rd grade, maybe 2nd grade, and then she would switch over to Saxon. And then much like your mom, like she would just kind of conglomerate, like when it came to like spelling. Well, we did use Rod and Staff for spelling, and that included some like language arts and stuff like that. But when it came to actually writing, she just did it herself. She was a really good writer, and so she fought with us. You ask any of my siblings, like we were, none of us were good at writing, and now looking back, all of us were like, we really should have listened to mom more. Should have practiced more. But she just was like, you guys have to learn how to write. So she would just be like, take this book, write a book report on it. Take this thing, write this thing on it. And then we did do stuff with, as we got older, like other small groups of homeschoolers. We would get together, and like all of our church homeschooled at the time. We had a home church. And so we would get together with them and do like book reports on countries.
Okay.
And just stuff like that, just like to make it more fun. Like I remember I did a book report on Libya, and then everyone did different reports, and then we all got together and like made a dish from that country. And like it was very memorable and super fun and super motivating to do it versus like, I'm just writing this and my mom's gonna read it and that's the end of it. Like there's actually a reason to write it and a fun thing to do with someone else. So that was, I mean, like she never did, some people think this is horrible, she never did a formal science, she never did a formal history, but we had, it was called the American History CD set or something like that. I actually have it for my kids now. where it was narrated like from the revolution, actually before the revolution, all the way through to like probably the 60s. I don't know, like all of American history. And we would listen to those while we were doing dishes, when we were on a car trip, when we were snipping beans, when we were whatever. Like we just listened to those all the time. And then we did that for history. We didn't do a ton of like backwards, like, you know, years and years ago from the beginning of time, but like my parents were also just talkers, like, and so we would talk about anything and everything. And then when it came to science, it was like we had a huge garden and we learned how plants grow. And then when we moved out of town to the house we lived in for 22 years, we had goats. We learned how babies come to be. And we had goats and we had chickens, and they were just very practical, hands-on, like, let me teach you as we're working in life, versus like, here's a formal curriculum. And my mom would try to be like, I need you to read this science book. And we were horrible at it, like horrible at it. But, you know, there are things now, like as I'm teaching my own kids, that I'm like, oh my word, like it doesn't really matter how much science you read or how much history you read. If you don't realize the significance behind it and why it's important, then it doesn't really get you anywhere.
Right.
And so I'm kind of thankful that she didn't do that. And I do formal curriculum with my kids now, but I've been trying to help them connect the dots between like, here's what you're reading and here's how it actually applies to your life and the rest of your life. So yeah, so that's pretty much what we did. It was pretty basic: reading, writing, arithmetic.
Right. Okay, so you said, Beth, you said your mom had a bachelor's degree.
Yes.
So what was her degree in?
Nursing.
Okay.
So, yeah, and it was just more like the protections, because we were following like the legislation, and I don't even know when that came through, but she's like, well, we're good. I remember saying we're good because I have a bachelor's degree.
Okay.
Because it was still in legislation at that point.
Right.
You know, so.
And Sarah Lee, did your mom have any bachelor's degree?
No.
No?
She was going to Great Lakes Christian College in Lansing. That's where she met my dad. My dad did have a bachelor's, I think. He never really talked about his degree, but my mom had started going, and then she met my dad, got married, got pregnant right away, and was just like, I can't like do both. Like I can't have a baby and finish school, and also it was so expensive for both of them to go at the same time, and my dad was struggling to they were struggling to make ends meet.
Right.
Like, and so she never did do anything beyond that. And
So
never would.
if someone would have come knock on the door and said, okay, well, you have like Sarah Beth's mom has a bachelor's degree, we're good, like that's fine. Would they have pulled your dad's
potentially?
Yeah.
I think it was one parent, if I recall right, as long as one parent had a bachelor's degree, because they were
Okay.
going through the, you know, like, I think like originally, like if they had a teaching degree, they could. But then they challenged that, and then it was, you know, obviously it was a bachelor degree at some point, because I remember my mom saying that.
So who was the one out there challenging? Do you know? Like, was it the HSLDA going into the, you know, each state and saying, okay, you know, this should be legalized? Do you have any recollection of how the legalization process came about?
I think, like, and like I said, is fortunately we never had anybody knock on our door.
Right.
But if I recall right, like with just what I remember hearing, like, we would get I get the emails now from HLDA. My form of it. That's not in my brain. But I remember as things came through, like them telling is like a family would get challenged, but most of the time, and I think what caused such a huge uptick in homeschooling to a certain extent is that they would. I remember there was a case that they said that they brought like the students on the stand, and what they knew was just blown away compared to what the public school had. So it was like a lot of it was just being like, well, they're getting a better education, you know. Right. So that I think that helped with the legislation. So yes, the homeschool legal defense was the one. I think we're the ones that were defending it and actively working. And obviously, you know, there was homeschoolers in Michigan that were making it happen.
Yeah, like I don't know him super well, but I've met him a couple times. Israel Wayne.
Yes.
I've talked to him a couple times, and he was telling me about how much so many people sacrificed, because there was a specific court case that was a family that was taken to court, and they pushed it and pushed it and pushed it all the way to the Supreme Court, and that's how they got so much information on it, and how it eventually passed, because they were willing to kind of put themselves on the line for it.
Okay.
And there were a lot of other homeschoolers that were backing them and that were there supporting them. But I don't remember the name of the family, but there was one specific case, I believe, that
that
actually
went through
happened.
Michigan, I remember.
Mm-hmm. So it's like HSLDA definitely helped, but there were definitely homeschoolers in Michigan pushing it and willing to put their families on the line for it, which is a huge blessing if you step back and think about it.
Oh yeah,
That's crazy though.
So you guys have both kind of spoken that there were other homeschoolers that you knew. So was there underground co-ops? Was there, or was it all? Were they meeting in churches or were they meeting in homes? Do you remember? Like Sarah Lee said that there was a group of families, her home church, all homeschooled. So what if it's a home church? Were they all in home?
Yeah, we would do, people would come to our house to meet. And before that, most of us going to another church that was at least homeschooler friendly, like there were other homeschoolers there. Not everyone was homeschooled, but it was very like accepted. And so my dad had actually gone to school to do ministry. And so he was a youth minister for a while at a Church of Christ. And then that went really sideways. So they ended up joining another church, and he got out of the ministry angle until we started the home church, and then he started not leading because everyone led, but I just think that helped him like kind of dig into the ministry side of it more because it was really something that he had a burden for. And so we just had a lot of friends. My mom especially was very good at making friends, and she'd ask questions. She'd reach out and be like, come to my house. You know, she had a slogan. I told my husband this the other day, actually. Like, she had a slogan that said, if you come to see me, come anytime. If you come to see my house, make an appointment.
I need that.
That's what she did. And so she was really good at making friends with everyone. Now, her extended family, I love them, and they're all super supportive now. But at the time, they thought we were really weird, and they didn't really approve of what my mom and dad were doing, because it was not really accepted, right? Now they're all like, you guys are amazing and we love you and we're super glad that they homeschooled, and a bunch of my cousins are homeschooling, and like now it's fine. But at the time it was very polarizing for the family relationships in a lot of ways. It didn't like make it so that we never got together with them, but to the point that my mom was like, I have to like create community for my kids. And it's not just going to be all the same age bracket. Like, we're going to find families that homeschool. And she found them through garage sailing. She found them through grocery store.
Wow.
You know, she'd go to the grocery store and people be like, oh, you have a lot of kids. I have a lot of kids. Let's get together. Like, even if sometimes they weren't homeschooling at the time. You know, there was just a lot of like, most of her friends would tell you they met her at a garage sale. And she loved garage sailing. So it'd be like, oh yeah, I've seen you at this garage sale and this. You look like a nice person. Can I get to know you? Like, it was just how she met people, and so it made it so that's how we met friends. Like, and we never had a lack of friends ever.
Okay.
So we, like, through the ATI and different things, but there was a church that we started attending, I think when I was 12, that pretty much everybody in the church was homeschooled. And, like, I don't think anybody wasn't. Which had its, that's like some of the things in the 90s. I'm like, I used to tell people, I'm like, well, there's the people that do it and the people that don't. But with that, like, we were never part of an official co-op or anything, but I do know, like, my mom pulled in people with expertise. So, like, my grandfather, he had a guy that he had met when he was 8 years old that he inherited a sword from that served in the Civil War.
Wow.
So when he retired, he did like just a lot in the Civil War. So we were watching, it's sort of funny, but The Music Man, and he does that 7 years ago. And I think I totally did that quote wrong, but anyway, brain is dead today. But anyway, so she got my grandfather to teach us about Gettysburg, and so he did, and it turned into a once a week he would come, and we did like an in-depth. It took us several years, and we did in-depth Civil War, which was not part of any official curriculum, but it got us to love history and talk about it and stuff. And then my grandmother, did music with us, and she played the organ at church for years. So I did piano, and then she was in high school band, which we found out later, like her band director was world famous. So she had more than just like her like we knew she was good, but we didn't realize how good it was. Like, it wasn't just the regular high school thing.
Like, it was just mom.
Yeah, exactly. And then as we got into our teens, we had a family that we were best friends with that came and did music. And I think my grandfather also did like astronomy with us, and we did it with them. So we sort of formed a little co-op, I guess, on like a Friday. But I remember doing like a writing project with them and different things. So yeah, nothing officially. And I do remember like different field trips and stuff. Some, so there were different groups that we interacted with, but it wasn't. I'm like, my mom would probably know how they connected, but I do remember, as I got into my teens. And then too, like, I think once it became legal, I think my husband's family started in the 90s, so I think they were maybe just before everything, but there was a huge explosion in the 90s of homeschoolers. So
Okay, that was one of my next questions. Is you homeschooled during the legal transition? So how did things change? Did you notice a change? Or was it simply
like the first day it became legal? Were you guys like, we're going out on a field trip? We're going to the grocery store? Like, did you guys know?
Yeah, I don't remember. Like when she asked, I was like, well, I remember that we weren't supposed to answer the phone, but I actually looked up the date because I knew, like I said, as a kid, you were hearing mom talk about it, but I wasn't really. I guess it wasn't because I know we didn't go out during the day, the truancy officer, but I remember in my teens. Well, and she did take us shopping, like all together, because we had shopping day. Because when we first started, we did 3 days a week, and then one of the shopping days we went with mom. So we did go out. But like I remember, I would go with my friend, and we would sit and do school in the Myers cafeteria. So awesome. Like people would ask us, are you getting your school done or whatnot? So I remember one time when I was 18, somebody telling me like, well, homeschoolers are actually better. Like they know how to carry on a conversation with an adult compared to. And you get a lot less, but what about socialization? Like, and I mean, yeah, maybe it's because all the homeschoolers I hid when it wasn't legal. I don't know.
Well, that's funny because I remember my mom would just take me out of public school some days because she wanted to go to the mall and she wanted someone to go with her. So I would get questions like, oh, are you homesick today? Like, or no school today?
Yeah.
And so I can't imagine what you guys had. And I'd be like, no, my mom just wanted to go to the mall today.
We're playing hooky.
Oh, no.
Oh, that's funny.
Oh,
So-
that's great.
What would you tell the modern homeschoolers who did not live through the olden days, so to speak, but they now maybe have more of a consumer mindset of there's so much available and I don't really need to work for it anymore. I can just kind of pick and choose here and there, but they seem to have more of it's a totally different mindset than your parents' mindset. Your parents' mindset was, I'm doing this because this is best for my family. And I think homeschoolers still have that, but I think that there's just so much more out there now.
I don't think that they realize the history that is involved in getting us to the point where we have the freedom to homeschool. And now, like we've talked before about accepting, funding from the schools or from the state for different programs and projects. And
What would your mom have said if they said, okay, if you sign up with this school district, we'll give you money to go take all these different electives? At that time, what would your mom's perspective probably have been?
I think my mom's and my dad's would have been no thank you, because it would have come with strings attached. Even if it didn't start out with strings attached, it would have ended up there, because you give a quarter mile, you get 2 miles, right?
Yeah.
Like you give in one small area and then everything just comes down. And it might not happen right away, and it might look really tempting and enticing right away in that moment, but then you're going to go down a path that she just didn't want to go down. She's like, I want this to be something that I'm doing, and I don't have to report to anyone. I don't have to, like I know why I'm doing this.
yeah.
And I think it's hard because there are a lot of people now whose kids just drop out of school, and because homeschooling is legal, they just go off the maps, right? And then they're not being schooled at home, and they're homeschooling. But I think the reality is, like, people will use that as an argument to say, well, that's why it should be more regulated. But before homeschooling was legal, that was happening, right?
Mhm.
And that's not a factor of homeschooling. That's a factor of people around those people are not holding them accountable in their lives, right? And let's just be honest, like, the government isn't doing a good job
Yeah.
of catching some of those things, and it's not going to work any better to have more regulations around it. It's just going to make it worse for the people who are actually doing a good job. So yeah, she wouldn't have liked it. She wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, I don't know. My mom, like, stuff's more expensive now. So, like, I know that's one of the things, even as a homeschooler
Yeah.
myself, I'm like, you know,
Yes.
because you can't afford certain things.
But I do, just to
Yeah.
cut you off for just a second, is I do think that that is a product of some of the funding.
Yes.
Is the costs have gone way up because now we get this free money from the state. So now it's not a cooperative of we're all
Yes.
going to get together and do this. It's more of a, okay, I'm going to offer the service and I'm going to take your money to do it.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, like, it's interesting because with co-op and stuff, like, you know, I think that it was, if you're going to do this, you're going to be involved. And the consumer mindset definitely is, well, I'm going to drop my kids off here. Because, like, even stuff we do, I was like, well, I will volunteer to get a discount. But there seems to be a lot more people that just want to drop their kids. And, you know, because it's definitely changed. And you've got, with homeschooling, you have a lot of the hybrids now.
Right.
You know, so it's different than when it was all on you and you were doing the curriculum and stuff. But yeah, it's the strings attached is because having worked in the public schools, you're stuck teaching to a test, and not every kid learns at the same rate.
Right.
You know, and it's so then you're stuck to not being able to do maybe what's best for your kid, or, you know, like homeschoolers being like, okay, you're in this level of math and this level of reading because you're stuck with having to put everybody into one size box fits all, and we're all different.
Right. So your mom would not have taken it either.
I don't think she would have.
No.
We're going to pause the conversation here for today. Make sure to join us next week for part 2 as we continue talking to Sarah Beth and Sarah Lee and hear about how their homeschooling experience has shaped the way they approached homeschooling the second generation.